Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hey, grief leads and frightlings, it's Margaret and Anna. What movie are we talking about today?
Well, it's only fitting that it's a full moon tonight, and we are going to have some howling insights into a newer film called The Beast Within. Before we get too far into it, you may have already guessed that it has one of my favorite themes that could also potentially be a trigger, lycanthropy. Also, there are themes of generational trauma, family chaos, addiction, immersive behaviors, isolation. What else, Margaret?
Domestic violence,
Animal
mental
abuse.
health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, animal abuse. And also, listeners, really quickly, we're recording on a full moon, so you might not be listening on a full moon, and it might not be posted on a full moon, just so you know that we are recording on a full moon.
Absolutely. And that reminds me, I have to make sure I eat later. Anyway, so should we dig right into it?
Yes, let's jump into it. So the movie starts with a quote about the two wolves. I'm curious, for this movie and in general, what do you think the two wolves are, right? Because it's like there's two wolves essentially battling.
Mm-hmm. So
Who
I
are
feel
they?
like it's a euphemism for the angel and the devil on your shoulders. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe in this movie it's not deeper. It takes that like this generational trauma and the desire to, I'm not going to say Kit Harington's character wants to break the trauma. He is very well aware of it. Also feels like he cannot control it. And so for him, these two wolves, it's the one that drives him to repeat generational trauma. And then like the him that has not been impacted by, like, when we see him as a dad playing with his daughter, and they're the royalty of the forest. Even then, still we see her, like when he plays with her and her, which dad are you? I don't know how to interact with you. I need more clues to figure it out. And even I think this movie does a great job portraying abuse, because even when he is the kind dad, how quickly he can snap, right? And then she's like joking with him and he freaks out on her. That happens in abusive families, where there's this parent that is like two wolves essentially.
Absolutely. And even the part with the sandwich where he's coming around the vehicle and she's like, oh, this is a really good sandwich. And he's just like, mean dad. And the other thing that they show that I appreciated, because I completely, the first half of this, I'm going to talk about what a great piece of art it is. The second half, I'm going to pick everything apart in reference to werewolves. But I appreciate, speaking of, okay, it's not nightfall yet. Stay back there. Speaking of the family dynamics that they show, I do really appreciate how they showed the father-in-law, so the wife's father, and he knows the dynamic of this relationship. He kind of knows the secret that, you know, the husband thinks that he's hiding, and he's doing everything he can to try and help his daughter and his granddaughter, until at some point he's just like, this is too much. And he leaves for a period of time and then he comes back. How many times do we see that family dynamic where you're my child, you're my sibling, you're my partner, whatever the situation is, I'm going to try and help you through this by doing whatever I can to help avoid the chaos and soothe the situation. And then at some point it escalates and it just gets to be too much for the other person. They realize that they can't, quote unquote, save everyone. And then they just need to kind of escape to themselves for a period of time. And then they come back only with the best intentions of trying to help, but they're still feeding into the toxicity of the situation at hand. And it can be very difficult being in that role, not just being directly in that coupling involving the domestic violence and trauma, but being in the role of wanting to help but not knowing what to do can be very traumatic and very difficult as well.
Yes. And we see that struggle with him. And I appreciate how you felt like he left. I interpreted it as that she was pushing him out, that we often see in domestic violence relationships where the abuser is further isolating their loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so his daughter keeps pushing him further and further away to where they get into a fight. And she's like, we'll get out of here,
Mm-hmm.
because she has to pick her abuser, because that's where she's
Right.
safest right now. And you've heard in previous podcasts, the most dangerous time for a domestic violent person in a domestic violent relationship is when they decide to leave. And she's not at that state.
Mm-hmm.
She's still normalizing it. She's doing the thing that people that are on the receiving end, oh, you don't understand. His
Mm-hmm.
dad was bad. He's doing his best. We've got this system in place to
Mm-hmm.
mitigate the harm. Kit Harington's character is still doing harm. He's not taking accountability. He's like,
No.
oh, my dad was an asshole of a man.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
not, how do I change this? How
Mm-hmm.
am I not being my dad
Mm-hmm.
in this relationship?
Yeah. And I'm happy that you mentioned that. And anyone listening, how many of us encounter characters in our family, in our friendships, in the workplace, in all of these different arenas, at university even, where their behavior that is not beneficial to those around them is subjugated and compartmentalized to, well, the root cause is because I had trauma in my life. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Anyone who's listening, we've all had trauma, and it's up to us as individuals to commit to doing the work. And when you do commit to doing the work, there are so many supports and services out there to help you complete that decision and move forward in that process.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up and saying, yes, you have trauma, and there's empathy for everyone in their
Mm-hmm.
trauma. It still does not become an excuse. I
Mm-hmm.
hurt, so I hurt you. It's that,
Exactly.
how, if I hurt, do I take my hurt so I'm not hurting myself or anybody with my hurt? And that's where the mom gets caught in this, because she loves, and that's something that happens too in unhealthy relationships. We
Mm-hmm.
love the person that they are when they're not being abusive. We love the person that they are, like when they're laying in bed and she's like, I love you like this. And then we use that as a reason
Mm-hmm.
to justify what's happening or why we stay. And that come like that wake up moment to be like, yeah, and they're not that all the time. And the reality is, again, she has these two wolves she's sacrificing, because it's that hope. Well, I want this wolf, so
Right.
this wolf, if I nurture this wolf, it'll be here more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's not as though traditional to werewolf folklore, these are not
Mm-hmm.
3 nights a wolf, or 3 nights a wolf, 3 nights a month where you wolf out and you're different for those 12 hours. And that's it, right? This is him consistently on a daily basis. You don't know who you're getting. And we'll get to that later, but that's a huge difference between werewolf lore and kind of what the movie was set to accomplish. I think that they did a great job using the full moon and what could potentially happen as kind of this mystical explanation for the cycle of abuse and how to correlate those. I think that they did a really great job, particularly in the end when, we find out that the daughter is now, quote unquote, a monster because of the behavior she witnessed between her parents and particularly the behavior that her father exhibited. So I think
So
the
she
movie was very well done.
Yeah, she inherits that generational trauma. And we might be getting into the things you don't like because I feel like you brought that up. If we go with the werewolf
Yeah.
mythology, then when they were sacrificing the pigs for him, that would be the end of it. They would take him out to that secluded, abandoned castle. He would
Yep.
have the pig and he'd be okay.
Yep.
He's not dealing with the generational trauma. So we see somebody that's maybe double cursed. He got the werewolf gene and the trauma gene. And it feels like, and again, this happens in life. We just lump things together. The trauma. Okay, yes, there's the trauma, and there's also the werewolf. Because again, like I said, if he was just a werewolf, eating the pigs every full moon,
it would be fine.
it would be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, is really when you look at it, right? Typically in folklore, there are very specific ways that you receive the mark of the wolf. And if it were generational, if you're coming from a lycanthropic family, then all of a sudden at the end of the movie, the daughter wouldn't have been a monster. They would have known since the first full moon after she was birthed, when she was a newborn, that she turned into a puppy. You know what I mean? Like she would have been a werepup. So I'm like, well, that's not accurate. The other thing is the puppy. That's not accurate either because wolves are pack animals. The puppy and the werewolf would have been running together through the woods. That's really what would have happened. Puppy probably would have gotten lost if it didn't stay with the wolf, but that's more accurate. So I think that they're even humanizing the werewolf character, which is funny because usually you're monstrosizing the human character. And the other thing too is when we look at pack animals, they don't just identify their pack by aesthetic, it's also by scent. So realistically, I don't believe, and this isn't like a love conquers all BS thing where like, you know, your heart heals the wolf, but he would have scented his wife, he would have scented his child and torn off into the woods in search of prey. These are things that typically will happen when you're looking at pack animals, right? You don't want to consume your mate, you don't want to consume your offspring. That's not going to be productive. And so yeah, I did have some issues with the application of the werewolf theme, just because in terms of folklore history, we look at wolf films, there's a huge difference. And you know, I'm a lichen lover, so I got to speak up for my genre here. But I think it was really well done. They achieved what they were trying to, which is great. I do feel like they should have probably made him a ghoul instead, because I think that when we look at these kind of like cryptids and metaphysical creatures, ghouls exhibit more of a maniacal behavior during the day when they're humans. And I was like, that a lot of his behaviors are way more ghoul-like than wolf-like. Because, you know, and I was actually talking to someone else about the movie, and they're like, well, you know, you never know if a wolf is going to bite you or lick you. I said, no, that's not accurate. You know, he clearly is a werewolf. He's been domesticated. He's living in a house. He's got a spouse. He has a child. He's domesticated. And when you look at an animal, when you domesticate it, they're trained to behave in a certain manner, right? So for me, it was just like a little off. And also, you mentioned the pigs. So if he's consistently been consuming livestock, generally speaking, that's the taste of flesh and blood that he's going to want. He's not going to have that strong desire for human because let's say he's 35 years. You've primarily been eating livestock, you know. So for me, those are just my little foibles about the movie. But as I said, I'm a huge werewolf genre person, so that's part of it.
Yes, and I appreciate that. like you said, like it gets a little muddy because they start with the two wolves, which if they had even kept it there and not
Yeah.
even brought in the werewolf and said, okay, we're
Hmm.
gonna go with this two wolves metaphor and how it manifests
Yeah.
in Kit Harington's character, then we could understand his character a bit more than, okay, well, what is happening? Why is it happening
Hmm.
like this? Because yeah, it was confusing. And yeah.
Yeah. When we look at other films that have werewolves, a lot of them have this sense of community. So the majority of the Howling films, there's a werewolf community, right? You have a sense of community, you have a pack, right? And that's kind of imperative if you are a pack animal. Looking at like the Underworld series, the Lycans, they're a community. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just one random lichen living there. Even I've never seen or read Twilight, but my understanding is there's a werewolf community in that too. Um, if not, sorry, but that's what a friend told me who loves Twilight and has been trying to get me into it for years. It's just not my thing. But when we look at a lot of those films, we see community, we see this strive for normal human life and these kind of preparations for the full moon. And I can definitely see the similarities between being a werewolf and not really wanting to hurt anyone, but you kind of do every now and then because you can't control it. And, Kit Harington's character not really wanting to be this person, but that person comes out. Like there's definitely a large parallel between those two qualities.
Yes. Do you feel like the movie, because it is a really good movie, would have done better if it had brought in the metaphysical component, that supernatural component, a bit differently? Because at its core, this is a film about generational trauma, domestic abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think of other movies that actually feel like Relic or
Mm-hmm.
The Taking of Deborah Logan, these other movies
Yeah.
that bring it in a way that you're still getting that you're watching a movie about dementia,
Yeah.
about mental health split.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it brings in the supernatural component in a
Yeah.
way that doesn't take away from what we are
Mm-hmm.
watching. We could even go with Trap that
Yeah.
we recently watched with OCD,
Mm-hmm.
that it's balancing that supernatural with what is happening. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
ghost
Oh,
movies
yeah.
seem to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and even if we look at, and it's one of my favorite movies, The Howling 3, The Marsupials, there is this community of werewolves. Eventually, I'm sure we'll do a cast on the episode, but you find that it's more of a coming of age tale, right? Unhealthy familial relationships. Our protagonist escapes and she comes to, the city. She wants to establish a life of her own and live in a way that she sees fit. But the underlying thing is she's still a werewolf and there are still certain things that can cause her to wolf out, right? And so you have kind of this consistency of, oh, she's developing a life. She has friends from her old community and they're helping each other and they're all really close. And um, at some point, she's off to the city with her mate, and then they come back to the country to get their friends and say it's safe for you to come to the city now. And you have such a sense of community and you have that pack. But then you also know, like, well, in this case, if someone flashes a light or a camera, it's going to be very problematic. And that's the only thing The Beast Within, and I know it had to speak to the isolation. I think it did a great job with no outside people coming in. Also, the house was so dank and depressing. I don't even think they had running electricity at some point because I
Well, they
remember
had
they
the
had, like,
jukebox, that I was
yeah,
thinking that was showing almost how trauma is, right? Like this
yeah,
generational trauma. So they have this falling apart, dilapidated house, but then there's this newness
yeah,
in the jukebox when I was like, this is a really
mm-hmm,
interesting juxtaposition that they're
yeah.
doing in the film. And I don't know what you thought of that, because I just noted, I'm like, this is like, I'm like, this
Yeah,
house
it
is
was
falling
very
apart,
strange. And then it
and they
was
have a
like, why
jukebox.
do they only have candles lit now when other stuff worked? And it was,
I
but
wonder if it's that the abuse, right? When he's
yeah.
raging, when he's upset, we have to light the candles. We have to be quiet.
Mhm.
We have to disappear. Then when he's good, like the bedroom looked modern and the
Yeah.
music is playing, so that it's like, okay, like now this house is alive and full of life
Mm-hmm.
when he
Yeah.
says that it's okay because he's the abuser.
Mm-hmm. Well, and okay, so I did not understand when he escapes, his enclosure, what exactly triggered that of or just he finally just got out. Like I was like, well, why now? Why is he? Because I would have thought like, some sort of triggering thing like, oh, what if the daughter, she had her birthday and then she was 13, so she's becoming a woman or something like that, and that like triggered him into something because he can't control that she's growing up, or some sort of scenario that really just escalated to a completely different level, and that's why he got out. So I was like, what, did he just get loose? Or I didn't understand why at that time, and that was kind of
So
hard.
correct me if I got this wrong, because you're talking about like smell.
Mhm.
I was wondering if he instinctually knew that she was getting ready to leave the wife with the daughter. Her dad was there. And so now she's done. And so, because that's when
Mhm.
he starts
Yeah.
stalking them inside the
Mhm.
house. So I took that as that he thought
Like
something was
new.
wrong. So he was able
Yeah.
to escape to prevent them from
Mhm.
escaping. I don't know. Because, yeah.
Yeah, just I was like, okay. And I just I feel like the isolation though, that was, I mean, the house itself, looking at it made me feel isolated watching the movie. Um but I just I'm with you. Like they could have just left it at the two wolves, and that would have been fine. Um I I almost feel like if he would have just been an evil character, like in the movie The Stepfather, he's just terrible.
Mhm.
That would have been a fine film as well. I just had a really hard time with the metaphysical element because of the chosen metaphysical creature.
Yes. They, again, yeah, they struggled even as you were sharing about the howling. I was
Yeah.
thinking ginger snaps. If we look at
Hmm.
werewolf and being able to bring it in into
Yeah.
explaining somebody's behavior, ginger snaps is
Hmm.
able to do that. And again, I think we both just agree that it
Hmm.
muddied what
Yeah.
is a beautiful
Hmm.
movie. It's very like,
Yeah.
it's bringing awareness to domestic violence, toxic
Hmm.
and healthy relationships, generational trauma. And that even the ending,
Hmm.
at the end, my partner and I were like,
Yeah.
so wait, like, what is he a bad guy because he's a werewolf, or is he a bad guy because the generational trauma? Like, which
Yeah.
is it? Because at the end, right, she's confronting him and they have
Hmm.
this moment and then his eyes are black and it's like,
Yeah. It's not.
it's like you, he's doesn't have to be accountable for
Hmm.
what he did because he's got the
Because he's
black
a,
eyes. And
yeah, like,
yeah,
oh no, my husband's a really good person, he's just a werewolf. That's not how that works. Um,
no.
that's really not. And um, I well, and we've talked about American Werewolf in London. We have a cast about that. I'm spoiled with the aesthetic of David as a wolf, so I wasn't loving the aesthetic of the werewolf in this movie either. What did you think about the overall look of the wolf?
I'm with you. Yeah, I was with you. I was like, no. And we,
Mhm.
again, in the American Werewolf in London cast, we both talked about, for both of us,
Mhm.
that's how we
Yeah.
want our wolves. There is still
Mhm.
something magical
Yeah.
about that, about the wolf in that
Mhm.
movie, because he's a wolf and he still holds his humanness. Like, you have empathy
Mhm.
for David as the wolf.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing I question too is she's lived I don't know, 10, 15 years with this werewolf. At some point, I would think that maybe she would have gotten scratched or bit and infected, because that's a really long time. 12 months a year, 10 years, that's 120 full moons.
Especially because he's abusive.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Again, focus on the abuse and maybe make it again about the two wolves, because then there leaves these holes where you're like, okay,
Yeah.
then how did she not get
Mhm.
hurt because he's abusive? It's not, okay, full moon's coming, we're gonna have to go chain me up
Yeah.
in the abandoned castle so I don't hurt anybody.
Mhm.
And even, I really just say this is a movie about abuse, because even
Yeah.
when she chains him up and his like whatever promise that he's always making her
Mhm.
promise that
Yeah.
she's not gonna leave him.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, and at the end, the daughter's reading White Fang. And I was like, I actually think she should have been reading Where the Red Fern Grows. I feel like that would have been a way more appropriate book.
Well, there was like cues of like Little Red Riding Hood throughout there, like with the pigs. So then again, this movie had some great ideas and they wanted
Yeah.
to bring in this wolf metaphor. And then it feels like they brought in too many wolves. The two wolves, White Fang, Little Red.
Yeah.
Stick with Little Red Riding Hood. You had it. The wolf is eating the pigs. The
Yeah.
wolf is abusive. And right there,
There's a
Grandpa could have
like
killed him with an axe, whatever. And it just,
yeah.
and I can appreciate that, because, and I think you can too, as like creative people who also love other people's creativity. We've talked about this. We get so excited. We want to bring in all of our influence and like, and this and this and this. And that's the importance of having good friends or good creative partners that go, whoa, pick a lane. Little Red Riding Hood, White Fang, two wolves, werewolf. Which one are you picking?
Pick a
Because you're
wolf
not
and go with it. Yeah.
you're not honoring all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, yeah, we've said it a few times. The film is really great for what it truly is. Would I recommend it as a werewolf movie? No. Is it a movie commenting on trauma and the cycle of familial abuse? Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. So who do you most relate to in this movie, if anybody? Because we don't have a lot of choices.
Oh, the puppy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just jumping around like, hey, and then I realize I've been put in the middle of a storm, you know. Poor puppy. I'm just telling myself, because I don't like animal death or child death in movies. It's just not my thing. But I'm just like, oh, he just hurt the puppy. It's gonna be okay.
I am with you.
Yeah.
Do you use, so if I'm watching a movie at home, I get on Does the Dog Die? Listeners, if you know about this, and I will check. That way I am prepared. And people that comment, thank you, because sometimes there's somebody that's like 32 minutes and 11 seconds. This animal dies by this, or this time you hear whimpering, like during Signs. I couldn't remember when I rewatched it. And people are like, the dog does die. You don't see it. And it fits the plot, like it is for plot purposes. So I really appreciate that website, because one of the VHSs, there is just dog death for no other reason than it felt like the creator was like, let's just go ahead and kill a dog.
Well, and I recommend the website and also YouTube. Like, a lot of YouTubers have kill counts for movies too. So you really not only know what to expect, but sometimes you get an idea of how graphic it is too. And you can also preview it ahead of time. So, I mean, I appreciate that. I think that it's great and it's very helpful.
Yes, as somebody that works with trauma and mental health, spoilers are your friends.
Yes.
They help you enjoy the movie more. Then you can relax. If you know somebody's gonna, like Anna's saying, you got the kill count, you have people, so then you can enjoy it more, and you're not dealing with your own trauma response, your own anxiety. Because for a lot of us watching movies, it stirs up our stuff, and a
Yeah.
movie is a safe place for us to work with our trauma, our anxiety,
Mhm.
our depression, our fears, all of that.
Yeah.
So it's okay to go in. So you are in control and you can decide, you know what, I want to be surprised, I'm good, or
Mhm.
actually, I know this is a trigger for me. I know it's going to upset me. So I want to be prepared. I think
Mhm.
Anne and I have discussed, we both, depending on the movie, have a hard time with SA.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
going in, do I need to be prepared? Is it going to be graphic? Is there what to do so that we can work on our stuff, which clearly the Harrington character is not doing in this movie.
Right, exactly. And it's very, like you said, spoilers can be very helpful. And it's okay if you are listening to this and you've seen a movie that has really activated you in some way. Um, Please, if you are currently in a counseling or therapy program, please address that with your counselor or the professional you're working with. If not, and you're having some difficulty navigating that activation, definitely know that there are supports and services available to you to navigate that. Um, Oftentimes, you will be receiving tools that are very helpful and healthy for now and for the future. We actually had a podcast a little while ago where I myself became very activated, and I was not in the best place after seeing that movie for about a week and a half. But luckily, I had done some counseling work in reference to some other issues. I had really bad COVID anxiety through the pandemic, and after the pandemic started to get a little bit better, and a lot of people did, which is fairly normal. But I did some work with a counselor for that, and a lot of the tools that they had given me, I was able to apply to the anxiety and activation I experienced from watching that movie, and it was extremely helpful. So it's just nice to know that the tools that you're given can be applied to different situations and really help you navigate that as well.
Ooh, thank you so much for sharing. And again, I appreciate you bringing that up as a clinician and somebody that is, and I'm a lifer for therapy. Like Anna's saying, when we get activated, when we're in therapy, then we have the tools, or when we've been in therapy. As a clinician, I love when people are like, I watched this movie and I noticed this, because we have then an awareness of ourselves. I understand what activates me.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what is normal activation for my nervous system. So then I can go to my therapist and be like, I don't know. I watched this movie. I couldn't regulate. I was disassociating. I was all these things for like a week after the movie, because that gives us insight into what's happening for me, so I can work on my stuff. So then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully when I watch a movie similar, I can be in what's normal for me. So if I'm in a car accident, I'm going to have certain reactions, and that's normal. We look for when our reactions are way out of that or way below, and that's stuff we can work with. And I know sometimes like we have shame. We're like, oh my gosh, I just freaked out. I Karened out or something. Okay, why? What happened? What was it in that situation that caused that response for you to just go out of your norm? Or I completely shut down. I turned into a turtle. I don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there's something there that's ready to be worked on.
Absolutely. And the great thing about when we're working on ourselves and kind of bettering ourselves and ensuring that we're healthy, it gives us an opportunity to encourage other people to do the same thing. And there's a lot of beauty in that as well.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So check it out. Let us know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, subscribe, follow.
And until next time, make sure you close your coffin lids, drink your bruja brew, and we'll see you on the dark side. Till next time.
Thanks for watching and listening.